Hello everyone, I hope your learning is going well and you're having as much fun as you possibly can while preparing for this exam. In this video, we're going to talk about verb tenses, or the time period that the verb in a sentence has. First thing though is a important little tidbit that will save you quite a bit of time on the test. If you have would have plus if, you cannot have these in the same clause. What is a clause, you're asking? A clause is simply an entire part of a sentence that makes sense on its own. So if we say, if officials would have compromised, things would have been well. The clause here is if officials would have compromised. That's one clause because that makes sense in and of itself. All we need to have a sentence, if you've ever learned this, is simply a subject and a verb. So something that is done and something that is doing the action. The other clause is things would have been well. The subject or the object, the thing receiving the action here, is things, and would have been well is part of our action. If officials had compromised, things would have been well. That's the correct version of that sentence. If we say if officials would have compromised, things would have been well, that is incorrect because we cannot have would have and if in the same clause. We need to use had instead. So this is important. These two lines right here. Would have plus if cannot be in the same clause. Use had instead. This is the correct version of this sentence right here. Let's move on. We covered gerunds in a previous video, but gerunds are simply verbs that are acting as nouns and they end in ing. Let me move the window here. Participles are verbs that are acting as adjectives. Going to the movies is a lot of fun. Going is a gerund because go is a verb. If we add ing, we make it a noun. It's no longer a verb, it's a thing. Going, the act of going, the process of going. We said participles are verbs that are acting as adjectives. So the running dog almost hit him. Where is the participle in this? Participle in this is the word run, but we have made it into running. And when we say the running, what we're actually describing is the dog. So we have verbs that's acting as an adjective. And remember, an adjective is simply a word that describes a noun. If we have the noun car, the adjective red describes the noun car. Again, gerunds are verbs acting as nouns. Participles are verbs acting as adjectives. Going to the movies is a lot of fun. The gerund is going. The running dog almost hit him. The participle is running. Let's move on. A very, very important principle. Verbs need to remain consistent. Many things in life need to remain consistent, and verbs are simply one of these many things that need to remain consistent. They need to remain consistent in number. Verbs that are plural need to go with plural subjects, and they need to remain consistent in time. Present verbs with present verbs, past verbs with past verbs, future verbs with future verbs. Consistency matters a lot in grammar. It's going to be tested very frequently on the exam. Let's see what else we have. Okay, if a sentence has a date, the verb tense is being tested. Makes sense, right? Because if a sentence has a date, obviously it's talking about a time period, and we're testing the tense of a verb, because like I said in the introduction, the tense is simply the time period of the verb. If a sentence has a date, you have to use the simple past. For example, if we say during the 19th century, Dickens was renowned as a genius, we have a date, and we have the simple past. Now, what is the simple past, you may be asking? Simple past is exactly what it sounds like. It's the past that's simple. It's the most frequently used version of the past. The simple past in this sentence is the word was. Almost everyone is familiar with the word was, or were, or is, things like that. Was is the simple past version of to be. We have a time period right here, which is the 19th century, so we need a simple past. Let's look at another example. Shakespeare, who was born in 1564, wrote many plays. We have a time period here as well, which is 1564. Now here, it's a specific number, whereas in the first example, it was a time period. It was a century. Here, it's a very specific year. It doesn't matter. So long as we have if we have a date or a time period in the past, we're going to need the simple past. What's the simple past verb in this sentence, you're asking? Well, it's wrote. He wrote. He was born in 1564, and he wrote many plays. Let's continue. If we're going to talk about the past tense, we need to use the word would. And if we're talking about the present tense, we need to use the word will. Let me give you an example. Shakespeare, who was born 300 years ago, would become a playwright. So we're talking about the past tense here. We're talking 300 years ago. And we're using a simple past, if you notice that, because we're talking about a time period, 300 years ago. 300 years ago, simple past, and the word would. If we have the present tense, we're going to need the word will. If it rains today, I will not go home. It would not make sense if this sentence said, if it rains today, I would not go home. However, it's kind of hard to distinguish that because many people do say that. Many people do say, if it rains today, I would not go home. The SAT is purposely designed so that you can sort of hear and somewhat see that it's wrong, but you can never pinpoint exactly why it is. And I'm telling you, if it's past tense, you're going to need would, and if it's present tense, you're going to need to use the word will. And read these two sentences again if you don't understand that. The past participle is used after any form of the verb to have. Okay, the past participle is used after any form of the verb to have. And you can scroll before in this video in order to understand what a participle is. Having sung, have chosen, having been. Any form of the verb to have, if you have a verb that follows that, that's a past participle. That's when we use a past participle. So we have the word having, have, having. And what follows that? Sung, chosen, been. Past participle is used after any form of the verb to have. What about the past perfect? The past perfect is formed by combining the past participle and the word had. The past perfect is used to indicate that one action took place before another action. So if we look up here, we have any form of the verb to have. The thing that follows is the past participle. Sung, chosen, been. These follow the verbs having, have, and having. Okay? So if it follows any form of the verb to have, that's a past participle. Keep repeating it because it's important. The past perfect is formed by combining the past participle and only the word had. The past perfect, why does that matter? Well, it matters because it's used to indicate that one action took place before another action. For example, had sung, had seen, had chosen, had been. Had sung took place before another action. Had seen took place before another action. So we can say he had sung before he had finished his homework. That's what the past perfect is for. The present perfect is formed by combining have or has plus a past participle. So to get the present perfect, we combine only the words have or has and the past participle. And the past participle is talked about before this video. And I don't want to repeat it because I want you to understand all of these things because they all fit together. So if you didn't understand it, go ahead and watch the video again. The present perfect is formed by combining have or has plus the past participle. Examples: has been, has gone, has chosen, have talked. That's the present perfect. And while you're learning all these things about the vocabulary, about the grammar that's going to be in the exam, these are also going to be very useful if you're taking English grammar as well as a foreign language grammar. Anyway, go ahead and watch the video again if you didn't understand it. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me.